Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the very first of a series of 4 talks at the 13th edition of the Amsterdam Storytelling Festival. We're very excited to be here for you. This talk segment of the festival is something that we're very proud of, to be able to curate an event in which people that we find incredibly inspiring, who have a story to tell, come and we get to just have a nice afternoon with them. That's basically what this is. The talks are curated by myself and Raphael Rodan. Many of you know us as the co-artistic directors of the Amsterdam Storytelling Festival. And Raphael is not hiding. He's not hidden in the set. He's not here tonight, which is incredibly unfortunate because specifically for this talk, for all the talks, but even more for this talk, we would have wanted him to be here. But it is strange Corona times. We're taking all the precautions, and there was a brush with some corona somewhere, and we hope he doesn't have it, but just to be sure and for the safety of our guests, we've decided to keep him home for the moment. So he's sitting over there. I think he's waving at the laptop, furiously scribbling his notes to tell me all the things that I did well and I didn't do well. So Rafa, thank you for being here. And the rest of you, everyone who's here. Now, we're going to talk about what is an incredibly fascinating topic within the way we look at the world. And we're going to do it with a Jew, a Muslim, and a Christian who walk into a bar. I'm sorry, that's a horrible joke. It's also not true, because in Corona times, no one is allowed to walk into a bar. So it wouldn't even work as a joke. This is why I got only 2 of the 3 laughs. Or maybe because you as a Muslim, you principally don't talk about bars. I don't know. We're going to get to that in a moment. But it is true that we're going to speak with 3 people who are representing their various faith camps. We have Mohamed Aadroun, who represents all 1.3 billion Muslims in the world.
That's me.
Again, don't take me so seriously, because you are, of course, you and representing yourself. But we'll speak on behalf of yourself from within the faith of Islam. We have Janneke Stegeman, Christianity in all its various forms. That's you. And we have Anamaria van Hilst. We don't just have the speakers here on the couches. By the way, I have to say, it has nothing to do with you being a Muslim getting the smallest one. Don't worry, we just had 3 couches, and we were kind of looking for a balance. That is the place.
It's comfortable.
It is comfortable, huh?
Yeah, it is comfortable.
And you also get a very good view on what's happening over there, because in a bit, our artists will perform over there. Great. So you have the smallest place, but maybe the most comfortable and the best view, because later we will have Erik Schoholm, our musician, and Margot van der Linde, our stand-up poet, to come and have a artistic contribution for what it is that we do here. And what is it that we're going to speak about today? We're going to talk about the Apocalypse. We're going to talk about the end of the world times. We're going to talk about that story that was told and retold in so many different versions, because as storytellers, we're fascinated by stories, and specifically this story that tells that this world in which we live is coming to an end. It's a topic that believers somehow relate to in their own ways, and also non-believers, because I myself, considering myself a non-believer, sometimes look at the climate change, look at the current corona situation, and look at so many other developments in the world, and sometimes I'm thinking, what did they know back in the day when they were writing their stories about, what is it, wasps as big as your fist? I'm not quite sure, but it is interesting. It is something we would like to dive into philosophically, and let's do that if you guys are ready, and if you guys are ready. Yeah? So let's start with the first of the 3 faiths, Anamaria.
Yes.
It might be a bit of a cliche, but speaking about end of times, you're used to it.
Yeah.
As a Jew, you often get the first?
I always get the first try.
Always?
Yes, but I like it so that it helps me calm my nerves, so it's perfect.
Okay. Okay. Wow, so we're a little bit cliche in that sense, but
Don't mind.
well, let's start with this story of the Apocalypse. I know the word is Greek.
Yeah.
Probably it's not called that in the Jewish faith, but you have a story about the end of times.
Yeah, I have to say before starting off, when you have 2 Jews, you have 3 opinions. It's very difficult to find one main story when you're talking about Jewish faith in that sense. You have people believing that there's no such thing as an apocalypse and everything will just go on forever, and we just have to make sure that this life is good. And there are people actually thinking that the world is going to end. And actually, they have a kind of an exact date. In the year 6000 of the Jewish year count, if you can say that, we're now in the year 5781. So we have about 200 years more to go. So not Corona is not the end.
My great-great-grandchildren will see the end of time.
Exactly. So it's kind of coming up. The good thing about it, it's not such a horrible story as you hear in a lot of others. It's not like people coming out of everywhere and monsters and everything. It's just the fact that at that point we will have 2,000 years of living peacefully together with world peace. The people who had a good life in past times will actually rise up from the dead. God will come to earth and everyone will just be happy, peaceful. No one will have hunger, no physical needs. We won't have any kind of physical needs. And after those 2,000 years, the earth will just disappear and get one with God again. So there's about if you believe it, 8,000 years of people on earth.
Right. So basically it happens in 2 steps.
Yes.
There is like the first level of the end of the world, and there's the second level of the end of the world. So here comes my story, my question to you.
Yeah.
In this particular story, what is the meaning that the story of the faith gives to these 8,000 years that we have on earth if it's going to end all anyway?
In Judaism, it's really about this world. So it's not as much about the Olam Haba, like the upcoming world. We don't really know about that. So we try to focus on where we are right now today. It's kind of like mindfulness. It's really being here because it's kind of so unclear. So the fact that it might still go on for about 2,000 years doesn't really matter. It's more about here today and making this world the best world that we can actually live on. And some people actually believe that by doing that, by performing something that's called tikkun olam, making the world whole again, we can actually speed up that time so that actually the Messiah can come to earth earlier and we can make the world whole again much earlier than those 8,000 years. So, but because it's actually a time to look forward to for everyone.
So here's my just cheeky mind. If the Messiah comes earlier, do we get something extra added to the 2,000 years?
Maybe. Yeah, but even after those 2,000 years, it will be a happy time. So even when the world is ending, all our souls and everything, our energy will go up, like we'll unite with God. So it's still a happy time. There's no, like in a lot of other faiths and other beliefs, there will be kind of like horrible people killing and hell and whatever, but it's much more about being one with God. So even if you would make that 2,000 years longer, eventually the end goal is the end where you actually become one with God.
Yeah. So from a philosophical, religious perspective, is there something that makes this way of living life in the moment more profound because there is an expiry date?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's difficult to say because even like when you have that expiry date, I have to say most of the people that I know aren't really busy with that expiry date because they don't know if it's coming, they don't know when it's coming, they don't really know what it will look like because in the main text in Judaism, like in Torah, it doesn't even say anything about it. It's much later on, like in the comments on that text. So it's for, I have to say for most people, it's kind of vague in that sense. So it's more about what you see as your duty in this world. So it's much more about maybe karma. I'm not sure if I'm not sure if it's a good proper word in that sense. But if you do good, you will receive good, and in this world. So not for a coming world, but if I want to be acted nicely on, like if I want you to be nice to me, I just have to come up in you and smile. You know what I mean? Like
absolutely.
It's
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very practical. So do unto others like you don't want to. I forgot how you say it in English, but you know what I mean, right? Like if you want to be treated nice, treat other people nice. Yeah. So and that's something I think you have to live by it. It's something, and it's very practical. I just taught in a class a couple of hours ago. People were like, "Yeah, but how can you do that? How can you create world peace?" But it's just about when you're stepping into a bus, saying hi to the bus driver. Or picking up plastic when you see plastic laying around and putting it into plastic bin. So it's very practical. And
but Anamaria, this sounds very nice, and there is nothing wrong with nice. I mean, if we all were nice, things would be nice.
Yeah.
But from that point of view of the text, from the point of view of the ancient philosophies that we handed down after many generations. For me personally, looking at it as a storyteller, knowing that stories are something that exists for a reason between the teller and the listener, there was at some point in the Jewish tradition a moment that, maybe not in the Torah, but afterwards, these stories had to be told and to be... So why do you think these stories did somehow then come into Judaism?
I have to say it's very logical in that sense. It has more to do with history and more with practice than I think with religion, if I'm very honest. The first texts that talk about some kind of redemption or of making it up is in Daniel, Daniel, not sure how you say it in English. And that was a time when it was written in the 2nd century before Christ, whatever. How you say that? I'm not sure how you say it. Current era, thank you. There was a time when the Jewish people were very much oppressed. A lot of people were living outside of what now is Israel. They were in how do you say, in galut, in exile, thank you, oppressed by other people. So they needed to have some kind of idea of one day everything will be fine. One day we will be living in peace. People who treat us badly will not be here anymore, and we can actually, get back in the right way. So I think that kind of makes sense.
So spiritually, the ending is not so much a destruction, it's a story of restoration.
Exactly.
So something needs to be ended of this imperfect world so that a more perfect, more restored version can take its place.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So here's a final question that I have for you at this particular moment. I know that for many people in the Jewish faith, to be part of this story, it's important to be buried as close as possible to the place where this restoration will take place, which is...
on the Temple Mount. Not on Temple Mount, but across from Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Yes. But that has more to... I have to say I kind of find it very superstitious because it has more to do with being closer, in a shorter amount of time. Because if they say the good people will rise up and then everyone will go to what now is Jerusalem. But I have to believe that God, if He will create that, He will also create it when you're buried in Amsterdam. I'm sorry, I don't. God is very practical.
But then you might get stuck in traffic because you have to walk all the way to...
Yeah,
so it's a very practical view of looking at it.
Exactly.
So of course I talked about the hill across from the Temple Mount because I know that that's a very important place also in Islam. See, I'm breaking the cliche. I'm not going from the Jew to the Christian, going to the Muslim. So, Mohammed, Jerusalem, a place that has significance within Islam, which is a place that some people believe that's where this time of restoration will happen. You, as a Muslim, you hear the story about the end of the world that, at least for Anamaria, is not a very dark period. It talks about restoration. But I know that for you, at least when you look at the texts, it's a bit more dark than that, right?
Well, let's put it this way. If you would go back to my youth and you would ask me, what do you know about the end of times? I would probably tell you a horror story. Like, I don't know. I know what you did last summer, then the Eternal Edition or something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because
so give us a few of the highlights.
Yeah, it's, you get quite scary thoughts. If you do this, you will be hanged by your ear or something, and the ants will crawl in your ear and they'll wreak havoc because you've listened to the wrong kind of words or music or whatever. So many things are directly connected to your actions here on Earth, and for me, the Apocalypse was a time. When I was young, of course, a time when that you will have to take responsibility for all the things you've done. And as I've grown older, I started looking for nuances, and I thought, well, if a human being is just like a binary being of being wrong or good, and that's it, then I'm not a human being, because sometimes I feel as if I'm in between. So the story that I've been told about the apocalypse doesn't really fit the way I see human behavior as a given. So telling the horror story actually didn't. I don't know. I don't think I really believe the real horrors. I think it's.
So, Mohamed, here's a question, because I know that you have your own kind of contemporary outlook on this story,
For sure.
right? And many people would say that they're kind of inspired by your way of looking at it. A story that deals with the afterlife, that it waits for you with a lot of punishment for the deeds in this world. And you kind of say to yourself, no, I need to behave how I behave here, and I need to be good for the sake of being good for this moment, right? Not so much for some binary kind of punishment in the afterlife.
Well, yeah.
But there is, within our various faiths, people who might have a more sort of literal interpretation of the story.
There are many. I mean, unfortunately, we have been exposed to very horrific acts of violence as a result of this way of looking at religion. But for me, growing up and being a Muslim is also being told continuously that your religion, sucks, pretty much. And on the other hand, you've been told, hey, man, your religion is everything. If you leave it, you suck. So, you kind of get squashed in between many things. So you need to find some alternative, some explanation in how can I bring those things together. And Islam, if you look at the stories in Islam, they are very much connected to the context in which they were created or whatever. And you can even see it in the Quran. If you look at the, let's say, activistic verses, the power, you have to stand up, you have to fight, you have to defend yourself, the war verses, those were verses that were written down, or at least orally then, during the times when the Muslim community was a very small community being suppressed in Mecca. And when they went to Medina, the start of our year, you see a change in tone. It becomes more peaceful, it becomes more. And if you look at all the stories that have been told about the apocalypse, because the apocalypse is quite straightforward. There will be a time of adultery, of everything that's wrong with humankind, and then one will come, the Antichrist, and he will, wreak havoc on the world, and then the Mahdi comes, which is like this superhuman being who will save everyone, and we will live in peace. The entire world will live in peace because the Mahdi has come. And many communities during, let's say the post-Muhammad era, which is kind of now, except for the 63 years he was living, they're all claiming the Mahdi. The Mahdi will come for me, for us, because we are suppressed. When you had the Umayyads, the small people were suppressed, they were waiting for the Mahdi. And everyone is waiting for the Mahdi. And even now, if you look at Jerusalem and the conflict about the Temple Mount, everything, everyone is actually fighting about Jerusalem from this perspective, because we have to be here, because when the Mahdi comes, or when the Messiah comes, or when whoever comes, we need to prepare ourselves. So,
as if the Mahdi wouldn't come to Amsterdam for you, right? This is the parallel.
Exactly, but it's the belief in the Mahdi who will set things straight, which is,
By the way,
difficult to accept.
As you're talking about the Mahdi, I saw that there's a beautiful parallel here between your story and the Jewish story in the way that you experience it, which is that you say that the most gruesome elements in the stories, they come from a period of not living where you need to live, right? Being in exile, being oppressed, and then there is a certain external strife that is inflicted on you that finds itself in the stories. So for me as a storyteller, this is beautiful that the stories that I tell are a reflection of the life that I live at that particular moment, which I think is a very beautiful connection that already we found between these stories, right?
I mean, it makes sense, right? Because for a lot of people, religion is a way of relief, if you say it, a way of finding meaning in your life. And especially at a time of hardship, you have more desire to find that. I mean, you can see that now in Corona times, where people grasp at conspiracy theories or religion to find peace and quiet. And I think it makes a lot of sense that a lot of our texts, like it reflects in our text.
Sure, and 500 years from now, if we have new religious texts from this period, we will have the Gospel of Corona.
Exactly.
We will talk about, all the crazy things that were waiting for us, and all of those stories will find their way in our various stories of the Apocalypse. Let's take this to Janneke. Janneke, you immediately came to me before this talk and you said that from a very personal perspective, similar to what was said here, actually you understand these stories of the Apocalypse, right?
Well, maybe not so much understand. I was having a very hard time with the Christian stories of the Apocalypse, because like Mohammed said, these stories are very, something is good or bad, it's very binary, it's very violent also. Also the history of Christian thinking and acting on the Apocalypse. So I was all the time thinking, what does this story mean to me? Where does it touch me? What is my connection with this story? As I always try to do. And then I was driving in the car to come here, and I was thinking of my son was born a year ago, and because these stories are also about the birth of a new world, right? And giving birth. So this was my first time giving birth. Giving birth is horrifying. It doesn't have to be, but my experience of giving birth was very scary, very violent. So, I thought, is there an entry point for me into this violent narrative of a new world? And then I saw myself. I don't know, when you have the push. You have to, the moment when you have to push the child out, at that moment, the midwife said, I have to call an ambulance. Because it's not, something's wrong with the child, his heartbeat is not okay. So, and I was so afraid. And then I was sitting down in the ambulance, and I looked up to the guy who was supposed to be there to help me, and I said, please help me, what do I do? And he said, I'm not a woman, I don't know what to do. And, so this is also a moment where I felt I could kill this man. Mm-hmm. I was afraid to die, but I also was like, okay, I'm even struggling now to tell this story because it's so. I think for me this was one of the most extreme moments in my life. So I'm blessed. I have a very privileged life. There are not very many. I'm not oppressed. I'm thankful that I'm the last one to speak here because I represent the Dutch Christian or post-Christian culture that we are all so proud of, right? That is, in fact, also very violent. But yeah.
So. You talk about a moment in which you felt that violence coming from within, right? And even though you say that you come from this Dutch society in which you're definitely not the person who is oppressed, you kind of represent the dominant culture. But if you would translate that to the religion that you do feel you're standing in that tradition.
Yeah.
There was definitely in the Christian history periods where it wasn't the dominant religion,
exactly.
where there was hiding from the Romans, where there was hiding from other people.
Yeah.
And listening to the stories, reading the stories, that can be incredibly gruesome. And then through the lens of that experience that you had, how do you translate that to the Christian story?
That's exactly what I was thinking. So I was thinking it's trauma literature. It's literature, it's written by people who experienced violence and trauma, and they use all kinds of symbols kind of to work through this trauma. So it's very intense literature, very violent, also misogynist, by the way.
So for us, just to get it, because there might be people not so familiar with the stories, we're talking about the stories, but just to give us the examples of what it is that we would read if we would read this literature?
Yeah, so there's the final book of Christian scripture, the New Testament, is called Revelations. So that's usually where Christians take their apocalyptic visions from. It's not a linear book. It's full of visions and symbols that come from the Hebrew scriptures. It's hard to read. And then there is kind of the narrative that Christians took from that, which thankfully I wasn't taught in my youth, so I don't have that burden. But you may have read these books or saw these movies about the rapture, for instance. So this is the idea that one day, suddenly all true Christians will be taken away from the earth. And all the other ones remain. So imagine, I'm certainly not a true Christian in this perspective, but I would be taken away. There would be just 3 people here, assuming that you are not true Christians in this perspective either. And then a war breaks out. A terrible, terrible period begins, which is also the period in which all the bad people have to die. That's the idea. So this is this extreme good-bad vision, and then after that, obviously taken from Jewish scriptures, also a 1,000-year reign of peace begins, which is also when Jesus returns.
So he takes out all the good Christians first, then lets the people fight each other, and then Jesus returns at 1,000, and then he brings back the good Christians with him? Or?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So again, also through all this very dark narrative, in the end, a healing story.
Yes, so in the end there's this very beautiful vision, because of course Jerusalem is the central city here too, of a new Jerusalem descending down from the heaven, in which I think the streets are made of crystal and the houses are made of gold, something like that. Very beautiful. And a glass sea.
Yeah. So one final question to you for this segment. You said you found it also very misogynistic. You found the story as it's told anti-woman.
Well, there is the image of the whore of Babylon. I'm using the word whore because the translation says it, not because of how I think of sex workers. And there's an image of a very idealistically portrayed women. So also, the female, as often in religion, it's either a whore or a saint. I think both are, you could say, okay, but there's also this beautiful image of a woman. But I think, this idealistic picture is also not something women should have to live up to.
Right.
Yeah.
And this especially finds its place in that last story, because as people are being judged, also women will be kind of seen as one of the two categories.
and women, of course, are also often portrayed as the danger. So the whore of Babylon is also, she's like the culmination of evil, and all evil she's very big. Imagine all evil is packed in the body of one woman.
One woman, specifically.
Yes.
Wow, what an image for a storytelling festival to kind of have. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pause our discussion at this point, because there's a few things that I want to tell you, and there's a few things that we're going to listen to. One is that you saw me look at my phone from time to time. I know this is what we do. It's the 21st century. They didn't have it in the time that they were writing the scriptures. But it's also my way to communicate with the outside world, because you guys back home who are watching, not just you guys sitting here, but the people back home, if you have questions, if you have comments, if there's things that you want to say, put them on our social media, and some of them will be sent to me through this device, and then I might read them out and ask questions from you guys. But before we do that, and before we continue with our talk, we're going to listen to some music. And for the music, we have an amazing musical guest. He is a Finnish Swede, or a Swedish Finn. He came to Amsterdam to study storytelling at the Mesrap Storytelling School, and we immediately made use of that chance to snatch him up and have him here to play music. He will be here at all the 4 talks, and for each of the talks, he picked a song that somehow relates to this particular topic. So give it up for Erik Sjöholm.
If I can't speak, 'cause you don't wanna talk, we only hear the echoes of our thoughts. missing your touch. It's cold outside without you. I'm holding my breath, my bones, my hands, my truth. I am facing my fears, making it clear. I'm still breaking here. I am facing my fears, making it clear. All the ashes that burn, making me yearn for another you. And I'm fighting my sleep, fighting to see dreams of you. It's not what it seems. We fracture from within. You said you're not free, and the walls, they close you in. You never returned everything I've learned. Every time we fought, everything I thought we knew, it's just an illusion, and I'm wide awake. I am facing my fears, making it clear. I'm still breaking here. I am facing my fears, making it clear. All the ashes that burn, making me yearn for another you. And I'm fighting my sleep, fighting to see dreams of you. Skydive into free fall, see a new sun, light the world below. Skydive into free fall, see a new sun, light the world below.
Eric Sherholm, ladies and gentlemen. And he'll be back tomorrow and the day after and the day after with more music. While we were speaking, some people commented on our various social media, and one person simply made a summary of basically what you guys said about the apocalypse, putting one line, and they all lived happily ever after, which is Paul Hughes. And again, as a storyteller, that very much resonates with me, because so many stories that we tell end with that line. There is another person who, Jens Olsen, who maybe is inspired by what Eric was writing, because he suddenly stepped out of this Abrahamic faith, kind of the trilogy that we have here, said, I prefer Ragnarok, which, for the people who don't know, is from the Nordic tradition, which says, an epic battle between gods and Jotun, followed by fire giant Surtr, lighting everyone aflame. And in the end, a new world is born, which again isn't Abrahamic, but follows similar themes. And now a final one, which I will read for you, one from Ahmed M. Hussein, who says, I recall a time when I was 13 years old. My Shia colleague in school, they were always telling me that in Doomsday, Imam Ali will come back to earth with his Zulfaqar sword. Now, for the people who don't know, Imam Ali is the most important Imam in the Shia tradition, which is what my family mostly believes in. And the Zulfaqar is this sword which has the 2 points in the end and not just the one. And he will behead the Sunnis and other non-Shia followers. And it was a hard time for me. And of course, this is a comment that you could read in a funny way, but it's actually kind of a similar emotion expressed as what you said, which is because there is a distinction made again between who is the proper follower for the Shia, the proper Shia, and then everyone else, even if they're Muslim, you know, not good enough, Sunni, not good enough, not Muslim, definitely not good enough. So this distinction between an us and a them, which again, I can find incredibly violent, but I understand slightly more listening to you guys how these stories come up, especially from a time and a place and a period of oppression. Because when you feel oppressed, you feel the need to protect your own more, right? It only becomes quite dark when in a time that you're not being oppressed, that these stories kind of reverberate. Having said this, and me having concluded my speech, there is a little other thing that I would like to ask you, Mohamed. In preparation for this talk, we asked you if there is one particular element that somehow symbolizes your faith, your personal connection to your faith. And you brought me something which I thought was quite beautiful to see.
Well, yeah, I brought what I perceive as a white cloth, this is not a white cloth. It's supposed to be a white cloth, so please believe that it's a white cloth. It's just a towel, but it's white, and it resonates. So when my grandma died, she was wrapped, she was balsamed, of course, first, and then she was wrapped in a white cloth with nothing beneath it. So you're wrapped naked and then put in the ground with hardly any decorations around it. So the most beautiful thing you can do during this burial is to help the people put dirt or sand on her body so she will be covered, and when she's covered, you just leave and that's it. But the basic element of this is that we all return to our, to our starting point. Like we came naked and screaming, and we go out naked, not so screaming. And that's pretty much what I see in the story of the Apocalypse. I see that we all return to our core, and we stand in front of this, this power, this I don't know how to explain it. I'm trying to explain God, but in a more holistic way. And once we stand in front of this power, there's nothing more than who we are. So in the basic form, religion in its basic form for me should be thinking about the white cloth. We all return to the same point we started. So there's only man-made differences. The nature doesn't see the difference, and religion doesn't see the difference itself. So that's
Mohamed,
what the cloth is.
Mohamed, if I may ask you, you remember that particular moment that your grandmother was in the cloth, right? You were there,
Yeah.
I'm assuming. How old were you?
It's actually a couple of weeks after the birth of my first daughter. So it's quite a philosophical moment, a moment of thinking about life. Wait a minute, she's leaving, the other one is coming. Wow, this is, so I know exactly 2014.
Wow.
Yeah, 2014.
So again, from a storytelling perspective, an incredibly powerful image that the things that we believe in and the things that we stand for and the things that we're inspired by have to do with those beginnings and those endings and the simplicity of it. The white, the cloth, nothing.
And the sand.
And the sand, of
Yeah.
course. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Janneke, we also asked you if you had one thing that represented your faith or your...
Yes,
relation to it.
I didn't bring it because it turned out to be complicated to bring it, but I will describe it.
So you'll be a storyteller, that's fine. We often we
Although
talk about things and it will appear in the mind of our audiences, that's absolutely fine. They will see it as if you brought it with you.
And it's a fine story. It's much more complex than the beautiful simplicity Mohammed just gave us. But so there's this narrative, Jesus died on the cross, right? And there's a narrative that one of the Roman soldiers who is there sticks a spear into his side. So there's a wound there. But this is a very strange wound because it's a wound that doesn't disappear. So a few days later, when in the story Jesus is resurrected, one of his followers actually sticks his hand into the wound. And also the story says that when the soldier sticks the spear into his side, blood and water flow out, which doesn't happen on a deceased person. So, and the beautiful thing is that when you look at manuscripts from the Middle Ages, this wound is pictured and it looks just like a vagina. Which the first time I saw it, I thought, this is weird, this is funny. But then I discovered that actually in Christian imagery, this wound is thought of as a vagina. So it's a wound in which something new begins. So there's this idea, of course, which I'm not totally comfortable with, but that doesn't matter, that Christ died for a reason. But I do think that it's very beautiful to see that a wound is not an ending, but it can also be a new beginning. And especially, when we talk about the end of times, then this is such a touching thing to me. And also because we, of course, so often we are stuck with male imagery of God, and God had a son, and then there's suddenly this element that turns things around, and something new begins. Yeah.
For me, the beauty of it is that you find yourself with the great mystery of these stories that have been passed down generation after generation, and here and there you find a link to understanding them from the woman's perspective. It's as if the story is not complete unless you understand that aspect of the story.
Yeah. And I think there's also the sense that, these stories are so complex and so rich, and you can kind of turn them around and find something, and there's your connection. So it's not like, religion is not like, okay, this is something and you have to take all of it, but it's something you can also play with and, turn it around and see where you can connect to it.
Great. So my homework for you is, because for me, I had no idea that this image existed. I had no idea that there is, from the Middle Ages, depictions of Jesus with this wound depicted as an actual vulva. I can completely see it in front of me right now. I know that people could see it in their own mind, but perhaps you can on our social media find a few and put them there.
Yes. Also, some of them are now in Utrecht in the Katerijnenconvent. So please all go there and take a look. It's absolutely amazing and wonderful.
So this is a particular exhibit that is made around these images of the...
It has breasts, it has vulvas, all from the Middle Ages Christian art, because all of these female body parts had, received a special meaning. Much more to tell about, but we can't do all of that now.
Okay, intriguing.
Yes.
I'm happy that we have some time to spend also after the live stream is over, but we do have a live stream which is constricted by time, so I'm going to go to you, Anamaria. And for you, your own particular link to this faith, what is it? What do you have that represents it?
Well, I actually have a ring with me with a Star of David on it, which I got when I was about 16 years old for my birthday from my friends. And at the time, I was kind of, struggling with my faith sounds bad, but I wasn't born Jewish. I actually converted to Judaism, and I was very young when I wanted to convert. I was about 12 years old when I was actually discovering that it was actually fitting the way that I thought in life. But when you're in high school, Judaism isn't the most popular faith in the world, to say the least. And
why? Because of the history books? Because you read about all the horrible things that happened?
No, there is a lot of anti-Semitism also now, currently. I mean, I used to wear a Magen David around my neck, and I was cursed out so much and actually got death threats and everything because of that. I don't wear it anymore. So at my school, I was actually one of my fellow students told me that he would tie me to a rocket and then send a rocket to Israel. So there was a lot of anti-Semitism also that I experienced, but also like it's difficult within the Jewish community because some people still think that you can only be Jewish when you have a Jewish mother. So when you're so young and you're actually trying to find your way in, you kind of fall in between the middle. Yeah. And then to actually have my friends supporting me, and they were so nice, and they were still the friends that I got it from were actually my witnesses at my wedding a year ago. Wow. And just for them to show me, this is you, we support you, we see that it actually helps you, it's how do you say it, it fills you, like it's actually something that you are, it's something that actually makes you more you. And we support you all the way. So this is kind of my.
So I have a question about that. But I think while I'm asking the question, maybe you can do this thing where you hold it out so that the camera can really, I don't know which one, but one of them can really capture the Star of David. So while it is out, and you look like a hand model, apologies for that. But my question to you. So you entered a religion which you describe as an incredibly violent, turbulent period in your life.
Yes.
For many different reasons. So while you did that, isn't there a particular parallel between the stories that we started this whole conversation with, the sort of violent, turbulent stories of the apocalypse, and your entry into it? Okay, you can stop being the hand model.
I'm not sure if I agree with that, because for me, and it wasn't about how do you say? It's not a violent period in a sense how I entered it, because it's not something you're not like Judaism doesn't convert in that sense. You can convert, but it's not something they try to convert other people. So in that sense, it's kind of, how do you say? It's more like people saying, what are you thinking? Why would you try to be part of a group that's actually discriminated against, which are being killed for just having your faith? So it was more about that. Yeah, sorry, I forgot my train of thought. But so it's not as much being like violently, in that sense, it's not as much violent. It's more that I actually found my path. I meant more
kind of violent emotionally. Because in a way, a conversion is, leaving behind everything that you believed in before and kind of entering a new story, which we kind of agreed that the stories of the apocalypse were about, right? So there is this transition period that you go through, a rebirth.
Yeah, but I have to say that, and that's why I always I'm hesitant to talk about a conversion, because for me there wasn't that kind of transition period. It sounds maybe weird, but for me Judaism wasn't something that was new to me that I had to change anything for. It was more of a confirmation of what I actually believed in, what I actually thought about, and that was also for my family and friends. In the beginning, they were very afraid that it would actually be like you described it. That there would be a big change and there would be a lot of things that I couldn't do anymore, a separation maybe from my old life. But it was actually more of a confirmation of the way that I actually lived. There's not a lot of change. When I read my diaries from when I was 12, a lot of the thoughts that I actually had then are still the thoughts that I had when I was 18 or when I'm 32. It's horrible, but it's very similar. So it's more of finding a name or finding a name for something that is actually still the way that I live. There's not such a big change when I hear a lot of stories of conversion. So it's more of finding a name to it.
Maybe in some ways similar to how some people would describe the process of when someone is transgender.
Yes, very much.
Where they say that it's not a violent change, it's finding yourself in what internally you already were.
Exactly.
So why would that be a violent thing, right?
Yes, exactly. I have a lot of transgender friends, and I actually have a lot of common with them in that sense. Yeah.
Right. Wow. So guys, basically what we did is we touched on this story because as storytellers and story listeners, we are very much influenced and inspired by the stories around us. As all stories, we know that the story that's told and the story that we can tell in this limited amount of time is always only a small segment of the things that we want to tell, and there are so many more questions opened than questions answered. So what I hope is, of course, that this conversation that we just had, the four of us, is not the end of our conversation, that we will continue it, the four of us, everyone else, the people who are present in this room, the people who are following us on the social media, and who are watching the stream, so that we will, I don't know, maybe transition into something else together, being enriched by this story. But while we look at that process, and I'm going to look at my phone to see if there's any final comments that people made that they on the social media. Oh yeah, my own brother who said music is my Messiah.
Nice.
Which is his contribution to what you said about the Mahdi coming.
He is right.
Yes, absolutely. By the way, Mohamed is the artistic director of the Amsterdam Andalusian Orchestra, so I knew you would agree with him. Now, having said that, I think it's time to go to the final element of this particular talk, which, like all the other elements, I very much look forward to, but especially this one particular part, because it's always going to be a surprise. We have Margot van der Linden, who is a stand-up poet, who is an improvised spoken word artist, who is someone who takes what is thrown at her and turns it into a piece of art. And she will wrap up the discussion that we've had here with a piece for the moment. So if you will hear the ending of our show, Margot van der Linden.
When the apocalypse is nigh, will you still walk into the last bar on earth to make a last cheap joke? You may not have a religion to identify with anymore by this point, but you will still have a relaxing whiskey on the rocks. And you will still sit down next to the very last person on earth and share a conspiracy theory or two. While somewhere faintly in the background, the gospel of Corona sings. Cheers. You know, they spoke of 2,000 years of peace and that then all goodness would come. You know, they spoke of no more physical needs and then all goodness would come. You know, the earth would just disappear, the souls would go up, there would be an expiry date, and everyone would feel good. Yeah, that sounds great. Cheers. When the apocalypse is nigh, maybe it's something like this. An empty bar and just you sitting there in the middle of it, devoid of culture, devoid of language, devoid of everything but your belly. Suddenly you realize you're pregnant and you give birth to something. But it's not a baby, it's transformation. You just transformed everything. Cheers. You know, they spoke of repentance and Mecca to Medina, and, well, Mehdi would come too if you didn't act quickly enough. But if you did act quick enough, you could be naked again. And then you could go to your core, and then you would wrap yourself in a white cloth, and all would be well. Doesn't that sound good? Yeah, that sounds great. Cheers. When the apocalypse is nigh, maybe it's just something like this. An empty bar covered completely in white cloth. And as you walk naked around this bar, you see the barman, who is a ghost, and he hands you some grains of sand. You think they're a drink and you stick them in your mouth and you start to chew them. And as your teeth grind up and down, you look for the nearest door. You see it in front of you. It's a giant vagina. And the only way out is through. Now, as you pass through the slippery, warm, pulsating gateway, you find yourself sitting naked on a rocket that is about to blast you through the stars and into oblivion. Cheers. Doesn't that sound good? Yeah, I have nothing to add. That actually sounds kind of good.
Margot van der Linden, ladies and gentlemen. So there we have it. The first talk, 3 more to come. We'll be back here tomorrow at the same time. That's 5:30 Amsterdam time and whatever o'clock in whatever time zone you're at. Tomorrow, the day after, and the day after, if the apocalypse will allow us. We will be back talking about the dark pages of our history and how artists will deal with it. We will talk about the rebirth of the hero, of how in stories someone has to die and stand up again, and how artists sometimes have to die and stand up again. We will talk about how in Corona times we had to reinvent ourselves as artists and what we could do to bring what it is that we do to you, which we as a festival had to do because that's what we did now. We had the talks that we had always, but now through the magic of the internet, it is being broadcast live there. If you enjoyed this, share it with your friends, save it, retweet it, Insta it. I don't know the lingo. I'm still from the previous red generation. But you know what to do, and that's exactly what you're going to do now when this is over. See you at the next episode, I hope. Bye. Bye, guys. Thank you, Mohamed. Thank you, Janneke. Thank you, Anamaria. Thank you, Margot. Thank you, Eric. See you guys later. Bye. Thank you. That was it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.